I stood in that police station, my hands shaking as I placed the USB drive on the detective's desk. Behind me, I could still hear my son's cruel laughter, echoing from our family dinner just 3 hours earlier. "Mom's finally gone!" he had cheered, raising his glass while my other children nodded in agreement. They thought they'd won. They thought the old pushover mother who'd given them everything was finally broken. But what they didn't know, what none of them suspected, was that their helpless mother had been documenting everything, every cruel word, every stolen dollar, every lie they'd told. The woman they thought they'd destroyed had spent the last 6 months building a case that would change all our lives forever. You won't believe what I discovered about my own children, or how I made them face the consequences of their actions. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Margaret, and for 32 years, I thought I was living the American dream. I was a devoted mother of 4, married to my college sweetheart David until cancer took him 5 years ago. After his death, I threw myself into being the best mother I could be. Maybe too good. I worked double shifts as a nurse to put all 4 kids through college debt-free. When my eldest, Marcus, wanted to start his own business, I gave him my entire retirement savings, $47,000. When my daughter Sarah needed help with her mortgage, I took out a second loan on my house. When the twins, Jake and Emma, wanted to pursue their dreams in Los Angeles, I sold David's classic car collection to fund their move. I told myself this was what good mothers do. We sacrifice. We give everything to see our children succeed. David used to joke that I'd give them the shirt off my back, and he wasn't wrong. Even after he passed, I kept his life insurance money in a trust, planning to divide it equally among the kids when they truly needed it. My children were my world. Marcus, the ambitious one who always had big plans. Sarah, my sensitive artist who painted the most beautiful landscapes. The twins, Jake and Emma, inseparable dreamers who wanted to conquer Hollywood together. I was so proud of the adults they'd become, so grateful that despite losing their father, they still came home for Sunday dinners every week, or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way they'd exchange glances when I'd mention money troubles, how they'd quickly change the subject when I talked about maybe selling the house to downsize. The way they'd grown distant, more demanding, treating my generosity like an obligation rather than a gift. But I was a grieving widow who just wanted to keep her family close. I made excuses for their behavior, blamed their father's death, told myself they were just struggling to find their way. I couldn't see what was right in front of me, that my children had learned to see me not as their mother, but as their personal ATM. That blindness was about to cost me everything I had left. The first real warning sign came 6 months ago. I was struggling to pay my mortgage after lending Sarah another $5,000 for her art supplies when I overheard Marcus on the phone in my kitchen. "She'll never say no," he was saying, laughing. "Mom's too soft. Just tell her it's an emergency and she'll hand over whatever you need. Trust me, I've been working this system for years." When I walked into the room, he quickly ended the call and smiled that charming smile that used to melt my heart. "Hey, Mom, got any coffee?" But something cold had settled in my stomach. The second incident happened a month later. I'd been saving for months to replace my broken washing machine when Emma called, sobbing about losing her job. Of course, I immediately transferred her the washing machine money. But when I drove to the store to pick up groceries the next day, I saw Emma posting Instagram stories from an expensive spa resort with her friends. Deemed self-care, the spa-fee, blessed life, Asafi, no worries. I confronted her about it that Sunday. "Emma, honey, I thought you lost your job." She didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. "Oh, that worked out. But I really needed this trip, Mom. For my mental health, you know?" She shrugged, like my sacrifice meant nothing. But it was Jake who really opened my eyes. I'd been having chest pains and went to the emergency room alone because I didn't want to worry the kids. While I was waiting for test results, Jake called. "Mom, I need $3,000 by tomorrow or they're going to evict me." I was sitting in a hospital gown, afraid I might be having a heart attack, and my son was demanding money without even asking how I was. "Jake, I'm actually at the hospital right now. Can you handle this later, Mom? This is really urgent. Just transfer the money, okay?" He hung up before I could say another word. I sat there in that sterile room, realizing that to my own son, I was nothing more than a bank account with a heartbeat. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Every conversation started with small talk that quickly turned into requests for money. When I'd try to talk about my loneliness or my struggles, they'd nod politely and then steer the conversation back to their needs. I started keeping track. In 6 months, they'd taken over $38,000 from me while barely asking how I was doing. But the moment that truly broke my heart came during what I thought was just a family dinner. I'd made everyone's favorite dishes, set the table with the good china, hoping for one evening that felt like old times. I'd been feeling so isolated, so used, and I just wanted to feel like their mother again instead of their ATM. "I've been thinking," I said carefully, "maybe we could start having family game nights again like when you were kids." The silence around the table was deafening. Marcus checked his phone. Sarah rolled her eyes. The twins shared one of those looks. Finally, Emma spoke up. "Mom, we're adults now. We don't need—" She gestured vaguely. "This whole family bonding thing." "Besides," Jake added, "we're pretty busy building our actual lives." "Your actual lives?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Marcus set down his fork with an exaggerated sigh. "Look, Mom, we appreciate everything you do for us, but you can't expect us to stay kids forever just because you're lonely." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Maybe you should find some friends your own age. Join a book club or something." I felt like they'd slapped me. Here I was, having given them everything I had, and they were treating me like some pathetic old woman who couldn't understand that they'd outgrown me. But they hadn't outgrown my money, had they? That night, after they all left, I sat in my empty house and made a decision. I was going to find out exactly what my children really thought of me. I was going to discover what they said when they thought I couldn't hear. Little did they know, their mother was about to become a very different person, and what I was about to uncover would change everything. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperation makes you do things you never imagined. I hired a private investigator named Tom Morrison, a kind man in his 50s who reminded me of David. I told him I suspected my children were lying to me about their financial situations, and I needed to know the truth. "Mrs. Patterson," he said gently, "are you sure you want to know? Sometimes the truth about family can be harder to bear than uncertainty." I thought about Jake hanging up on me in the hospital, about Emma's lies, about Marcus's callous phone conversation. I need to know who my children really are. What Tom discovered over the next month shattered every illusion I had left. Marcus's struggling business was actually thriving. He'd used my retirement money not to save his company, but to buy a luxury condo downtown. The monthly business expenses I'd been covering were payments on a BMW and membership fees for an exclusive country club. Sarah wasn't a starving artist barely making rent. She was living with her wealthy boyfriend in his penthouse, using my money to fund expensive art supplies she then sold for profit on the side. The mortgage help I'd given her had gone straight into her investment portfolio. But the twins, they were the worst. Jake and Emma had been working together, coordinating their sob stories to maximize what they could extract from me. The apartment they claimed to share in L.A., it didn't exist. Jake was actually living rent-free with his girlfriend's family, while Emma had moved in with a successful influencer who was supporting her lifestyle. Every emergency had been carefully orchestrated. The breaking point came when Tom showed me the recordings he'd made during their family group chat conversations. I sat in his office, listening to my children's voices through his speakers, and felt my heart break into pieces. "God, she's so gullible," Sarah's voice came through clearly. "I just mentioned the word art, and she opens her wallet." Marcus laughed. At least you have to pretend to be creative. I just say business opportunity, and she throws money at me." "The best part," Emma chimed in, "is how grateful she acts when we show up for dinner, like we're doing her this huge favor." Jake's voice was the cruelest. "She's so desperate to feel needed. It's actually kind of pathetic. But hey, easy money, right?" "Think she suspects anything?" Sarah asked. "Are you kidding?" Marcus scoffed. "She's too busy playing the martyred single mother to notice we're bleeding her dry. As long as we show up once a week and let her cook for us, she'll keep paying." "What happens when she runs out of money?" Emma wondered. There was a pause. Then Jake spoke with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "Then I guess we won't need to pretend to care anymore." They all laughed. My children, the babies I'd nursed through fevers, the teenagers I'd stayed up with during heartbreaks, the young adults I'd sacrificed everything to support, were laughing about using me. I sat in that investigator's office and felt something inside me die. But from its ashes, something else was born, something they'd never seen before and never expected from their sweet, pushover mother. I was going to show them exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. "Tom," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in months, "I need you to help me with one more thing. And this time, we're not just gathering evidence. We're building a case." Over the next 2 months, Tom and I worked together like we were planning a military operation. We documented every lie, every false emergency, every dollar they'd stolen through deception. But more importantly, we prepared what I came to think of as the reckoning. See, what my children didn't know was that their dear old mother had been learning. I'd been researching financial fraud, consulting with lawyers, and discovering exactly what legal options I had. They thought I was just a naive nurse, but I'd spent 30 years dealing with difficult people in high-stress situations. I knew how to be strategic when I needed to be. The first phase was simple. I stopped giving them money. When Marcus called about another business emergency, I told him I was having my own financial difficulties and couldn't help. When Sarah needed art supplies, I suggested she get a part-time job. When the twins called with their coordinated sob stories, I expressed my sympathy but said my hands were tied. Their reactions were immediate and revealing. The Sunday dinners stopped. The check-in calls disappeared. For 3 weeks, I didn't hear from any of them. It was like I died the moment my wallet closed. But I wasn't done. Phase 2 involved some creative accounting with help from my lawyer. I discovered that several of their emergencies qualified as financial fraud, since they'd obtained money under false pretenses. I also learned that the life insurance money I'd been planning to divide among them was still legally mine to control. Then came the final dinner, the one that would end everything. I invited them all over, telling them I had important family news to share. They came, probably hoping I'd gotten access to more money somehow. I cooked their favorite meals one last time, set the table with David's mother's china, and waited. They were different now, colder, more impatient. Without the pretense of needing my money immediately, they didn't bother hiding their true feelings. "So what's this big news, Mom?" Marcus asked, checking his watch. I smiled and pulled out a folder. "Well, I've been doing some thinking about your father's life insurance money. You know, the fund I've been saving to divide among you 4 when you really needed it." Their attention sharpened instantly. Emma actually licked her lips. "I've decided to distribute it early," I continued. "After all, you're all adults now, building your actual lives, as you put it." That's amazing, Mom," Sarah said, and for a moment she almost sounded like my little girl again. "How much are we talking about?" Jake asked bluntly. "Well, after your father's death, the policy was worth $250,000. With interest and careful investing, it's grown to just over $300,000. I watched their eyes light up with greed. $75,000 each. They were probably already spending it in their minds. "However," I continued, "I need to discuss some other family business first." I opened the folder and began pulling out documents. Bank statements, screenshots of their social media posts, transcripts of their conversations, photos of Marcus's condo, Sarah's boyfriend's penthouse, evidence of the twins' real living situations. The color drained from their faces. You see, I hired a private investigator. I know about Marcus's country club membership and his BMW. I know about Sarah's investment portfolio and her penthouse lifestyle. I know that Jake and Emma have been coordinating their lies to maximize what they could steal from me. Mom, we can explain, Marcus started. Oh, you don't need to explain, I said calmly. I have recordings of you explaining everything. Would you like to hear the part where you called me pathetic, or the part where you laughed about bleeding me dry? I pressed play on Tom's recording device. Their own voices filled the room, cruel and mocking and absolutely damning. Emma started crying. Jake looked like he might be sick. Sarah was staring at the table, and Marcus had gone completely white. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and strong. You're going to pay back every penny you obtained through fraud. You're going to sign these documents acknowledging your theft, and then you're going to leave my house and not come back. And the inheritance? Marcus whispered. I smiled. What inheritance? I'm donating every penny to charity. Consider it your father's final lesson about treating people with respect. That's when my son stood up and screamed, Mom's finally gone! He thought he was celebrating my defeat. He had no idea I was just getting started. 3 hours later, I walked into that police station with everything Tom and I had gathered. Financial fraud, elder abuse, theft by deception. My children had committed multiple crimes, and I had documented proof of all of it. The detective, a woman about Sarah's age, listened to everything with growing amazement. Mrs. Patterson, are you sure you want to press charges? These are your children. Detective, my children died the day they decided I was worth more to them as a bank account than as a mother. These are just strangers who happen to share my DNA. I didn't send them to prison. I'm not that cruel. But they did have to pay restitution, perform community service, and attend financial responsibility counseling. More importantly, they lost something they'd taken for granted, me. Marcus lost his condo when he had to pay me back. Sarah had to get a real job. The twins had to move back home with their respective partners' families. Only now everyone knew the truth about their lies. They tried to reconcile, of course. They sent cards, flowers, long letters about how sorry they were, but I'd heard their true voices in those recordings. I knew who they really were when they thought no one was watching. I kept my promise about the inheritance money. I donated it all to a charity that helps elderly people who've been financially abused by their families. The day I handed over that check, I felt lighter than I had in years. These days, I have a different kind of family. I volunteer at the senior center where I've met people who value friendship over transactions. I joined a book club, took up painting, started traveling. I discovered that I'm actually quite good company when I'm not being used. Sometimes people ask if I miss them. The truth is, I miss the children I thought I had, but I don't miss the people they actually were. I gave them everything I had, and they threw it away for money. But in losing them, I found something I'd forgotten I had, myself. And that, it turns out, was worth more than any inheritance.